Will Butler Brothers Racing, also previously known as Rocky Mountain ATV MC KTM, continue to race past this St. Louis weekend, or is the team closing down? This is This Week in Moto. I'm your host, Michael Lindsay, and this is presented to you by Yoshimura. So as the title says, we're only really talking about one main subject this week. It is kind of the ever-growing story of the last couple days, or the ever-changing story. So we won't get too much into the past. They're with the Butler Brothers Racing Organization, or as a lot of people have publicly known it as, the Rocky Mountain ATV MC KTM team. Under some of its prior sponsorship was the BTO Sports Team. The team itself has operated for around 18 or 19 years under the BBMX banner, Butler Brothers MX Racing. Under now the primary ownership of Forrest Butler. I believe in the earlier days it was co-owned between him and one or two of his brothers that all raced. Grew into one of the larger privateer teams in the paddock and became a factory support team that has even won a supercross race with Blake Baggett. Now, the Blake Baggett thing will, of course, pop into a few people's heads as where some of the public controversy with this team has begun. And as we said, we won't dive into too much of the past. We'll just make one kind of comment about what has come up before. We talk about what has just happened, in the last 6 months or so. Everything you hear here are just conversations and statements we've gone from riders involved with the team recently, certain staff members, certain people that are agents of some of the people involved. Again, nothing you're going to hear here is actually a statement. We will talk about one of the public statements, but nothing here is any information that we have received from talking to Forrest Butler or on statement from a BBMX personnel as the current state of the team. Honestly, again, this may come across as a little one-sided. These are the comments we've received. It's what we're going to talk about based on a prior conversation we've had with them. It wasn't maybe the friendliest conversation, so we kind of didn't even really bother at this point to reach out. So again, what you're hearing here is mostly from some of the people that are being affected by the current situation. This may only be one side of the story, as they say, but it's what we are choosing to talk about today. So before we get into it, again, the Baggett thing, there has been past accusations with this team of not paying riders and certain personnel. We know certain people have been on team. Again, it's their side of the story that have not been paid or had other issues. So a lot of people have heard these lingering stories over the years. Coming into this year, the team has definitely changed in appearance, mostly with the staff. It was almost a complete overhaul during the off season. There were some returning faces in sense of people that had worked for the team before that were coming back, but pretty much the entire team we saw in the last year was gone. I think one mechanic carried over, and then there was a certain staff member who had been promoted up to the current team manager role. But other than that, your prior team manager with Michael Byrne, a lot of the technicians for the team, crew chiefs, all that are gone. Coming into this season, they went to a new structure with kind of 3 people sort of running the team in a day-to-day sense. Dylan Rash, who's the team manager. You had Seth Rarick, who was brought over from Star Racing as a sort of rider coach, team trainer, dealing kind of with the riders. Dylan's dealing more with, I think, the logistics, running of the team, and then Derek Rankin came in as sort of a crew chief technical role, overseeing how the bikes were going to be built, what parts they were using, and developing the race package. The team no longer had access to their lease program with KTM for engines and suspension. Official word we heard before the season was, they had chose to go away from that. Sources we've also had said, hey, they were no longer allowed to run that option. So due to possibly some past bills that hadn't been paid, they just decided to sort of close that program. The lease program did also shut down technically for the Tedders. They weren't available to it. But we also know that there is technically another KTM team out there that is still receiving factory services help. So it's kind of an odd scenario. So the team went in-house with engines and suspension. The engine program is a mix of twisted development parts and some stuff the teams come up with. The suspension program goes through AEO, REP, which is Mark Johnson and Jeremy Schism. Jeremy Schism owns AEO Power Sports. Mark Johnson runs the suspension department. He used to be the ex-Red Bull KTM guy. They were doing the lease program on the suspension and sending a technician race. All this info will kind of become applicable as we talk about the timeline of what's just recently transpired. So coming into the season, another behind-the-scenes talk was that there was a new investor / co-owner in the team. And this is where some of the first unusualness came up with. In a preseason article, we mentioned this person as a new co-owner investor in the team. And that's immediately where we got some bark back from the current owner association that no, there is no other co-owner in the team. But kind of everybody in the paddock knows that somebody has invested into the team. A man by the name of Mark, I believe his last name is McKenzie. He is the owner of the 83 compound, which is Chad Reed's old place. He's the one that bought the track. That's actually where they moved the team to operate now. He sort of got involved and helped financially fund a few things that the team was, you would say, behind on. A few items we know of directly. We won't go into too much detail. But the reported sums between a few different sources we have is that Mark has put in somewhere around $1 million to $1.5 million into the operation to kind of get it back and moving and hire some of these new people and try to really reshape the program. So coming into right before the season started, one of the first things we saw happen was the technical director / crew chief, Derek Rankin, left the team over some butting some heads with the ownership group. He ended up stepping away from the team. They never actually filled that role. We do know that the team arrived late to A1, with some issues with getting just trailer and truck stuff handled last minute. They didn't have a driver up until days before A1. The driver that came in the first couple rounds was only doing the first couple weeks. This kind of stuff happens. Not initially a big deal. But just as the season go on, we'd hear some rumblings about some issues within the team, with riders, with supplies of stuff. And what's come down to all of a sudden the last couple weeks is a series of events that have led to a dropout of some major backers of the team. So a lot of what we saw just happen with Rocky Mountain stepping away from the team as a title sponsor, and basically the team switching all their social media back to their old BBMX social media handles, is we believe what Rocky Mountain has proposed as them breaking their contract by not fulfilling certain obligations, is that at the fact at Seattle Supercross, they did not field a rider. The team did try to get fill-ins, but we know of at least 5 riders they've contacted going into Seattle, different levels of privateers, to ride for the team, who all actually refused to ride for them because of either prior obligations, the fact that some riders have some negative inclinations toward the team, and some reservations about going to ride for them under the circumstances they had heard recently. We heard they may have reached out to close to around 10 riders, but we know some of them were like Logan Carnow, Justin Starling, Tristan Lane, riders of that kind of era or that area are the ones that were reached out to and said, hey, no, I'm good. Don't want to ride the bike. I have my own program. For other reasons, they all basically denied. So the team did not field a racer. With that was probably the moment where we'd see Rocky Mountain be able to get out of their contract. The team, it is a 3-man team, but typically with a title sponsor contract like that, they are probably required to operate at least 1 to 2 riders, depending on how they negotiate the contract. In most cases, there might just be a financial penalty for missing that at a round if, the parties are all getting along. It's just like, hey, we'll just knock a little money off, but don't worry about it till the next round. But in this case, of course, it basically ended with a termination of their deal. So clearly there is some behind-the-scenes unsatisfactory with them as partners, and Rocky Mountain thought that it was best for them to step away from working with the team. Something we have not seen official PR on today, but kind of everybody in the industry is talking about, is that it sounds like KTM has ended their deal with the team as well. We don't know to what level of support KTM was providing them anymore. We imagine they had some sort of deal for bikes and parts and a few items. But it sounds like KTM has basically stepped away from their part of the table. And then not lastly, but one of the other bigger items is the whole co-owner investor part we talked about. From our rough understanding is Mark McKenzie had put a certain amount of money into the team to help it. Again, we mentioned the dollar figure we've heard earlier, not a confirmed dollar amount, just what we've been told by multiple sources, that as of right now, he doesn't have any sort of paperwork that actually ties him to the team. He is not technically co-owner or anything on table. There was no actual written deal made, so he's kind of in a weird spot, I guess, between himself and Forrest on what is going on with the actual team ownership split, things of that matter. We've heard from everybody that Mark has basically stepped away from his portion of the team. Again, he owns the property where the team's race shop is at and where the guys are practicing right now. We even heard a comment that from somebody else that's close to the situation that the team manager who works for Force hasn't been allowed on the property the last couple of weeks due to some of the issues at hand. Coming into this weekend, it was originally announced that Max Anstie and Shane McElrath would both return from injury to ride, but rumors floating around were that neither rider has been paid as of recently. They were both, from what we understand, promised to be paid if they lined up this weekend. But between some of the communication issues we've heard of, both riders did show up today in St. Louis, both Shane McElrath and Max Anstie. But from our understanding, almost none of the other staff from the team has arrived. We believe that Seth Rarick has officially quit. We believe that the mechanics have all resigned from our understanding. We think about the only staff that's there is possibly the team manager and the truck driver at this point. The truck is there. Shane's bike was out on display. From a conversation we overheard with Anstie, he said his bike isn't even built. There's nobody there to build his bike. There was a comment listed about their suspension being repoed. We talked to Mark and Jeremy. They said they haven't taken it back. They want to help the riders. They were still willing to leave the equipment for them, but there is some issues on them not being paid as well. But they were down to help the riders. But either way, a few people on the ground have told us that they ran into both Max and Shane, and basically they're both walking around the pits telling everybody, we no longer ride for the team. They're going to Mitch Payne, to Star Racing, all these guys looking for rides, going truck to truck, trying to find out what they're going to do for the rest of the year. For the third rider, we haven't talked about, Joey Savatgy. The other rumor street is that he was actually able to get out of his contract within the last week, 2-3 weeks or so, that he was able to get out of his contract and wasn't going to continue with the team. And now Shane and Max are basically telling everybody they're done. They're not racing. There's nobody there to work on their bikes. Max's bike isn't apparently even built at this point. So yeah, it's a mess. Basically, the timeline of this week is title sponsor pulls out. Butler Brothers puts out a statement that the team would continue racing. They had other sponsorship in the work. They plan to finish Supercross. Outdoors had 2 riders coming back this weekend. Both riders have arrived at the race. The equipment is apparently not sufficiently built for them to race. The technicians have not arrived and have rumoredly quit. And now both riders are walking around the pits looking for other rides. At this point, can the team continue? Sure, there's always a miracle. But at this point, a lot of things sound like they have to be solved within the next week to basically arrive at Atlanta with a staff, riders, and components to even operate the motorcycle. So there's a decent chance this may be the end for BBMX. We're not stating it is. There is always a chance that something can be recovered. But as we're looking at kind of all the pieces of the puzzle on the table, it's really hard to see how the team can continue on with the massive amount of blowback and fallout that has happened just in the last couple of days. So we will see how this story develops. We imagine that as race day plays out tomorrow, we'll probably see some statements from riders like Shane and Anstie, start to learn more what their side of the story is. But like I said, as of the moment, unless something changes in the wee hours of tonight, we do not foresee either of those riders racing their BBMX KTMs tomorrow, and wouldn't be surprised that if in the next couple weeks they have rides on possibly different teams and different brands, so they are able to finish out their seasons. We believe that both for Max and Shane, they are actually both 250 Supercross eligible from what we're aware. So we know that some of the people they were reaching out to were some of the 250 teams with injured riders, such as Mitch Payne from Pro Circuit, the Star Racing team, trying to see if they can fill some of those spots. Even a part of news I guess we'll throw in here is it sounds like Cameron McAdoo has separated his shoulder in press today. We don't know to what degree that injury is, so we're not even sure if anyone will be racing also for Pro Circuit tomorrow night due to injuries. That's kind of like I said, it's a lot of this person said, that person said, rumor this, rumor that. There's always two sides to a story, but where there's smoke, there's usually a fire, and there's a lot of smoke at the moment in the room. So put the pieces of the puzzle together. I think most people can kind of figure out what is possibly true in this situation and what isn't. If you've got any comments, throw them in the comment section below. As we get update information, we'll either make another video, maybe try to answer some questions down there. And yeah, if you also want to see some of the latest buzz, check out the forum at vitalmx.com. There's a couple of conversations about this, along with just some of the injuries and other team updates going into this weekend. So if you like what we do on this channel, like, subscribe, thumbs up. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next week on This Week in Moto.